the mistake I see a lot of people make is focusing so much on the messaging and not thinking about who they're reaching out to. And that's where you get people wanting email templates, right? So if you're using an email template that you found online somewhere, you're already making a big mistake.
Hey, welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex, the first global community connecting top-tier independent management consultants with one another. We just heard from today's guest, Jason Bay, who is the founder of Blissful Prospecting, a firm that helps B2B sales reps, small and medium businesses, and nonprofits create sustainable revenue growth. In our discussion, Jason explains to me the reply method that his firm created to guide the writing of cold emails to prospects. Reply stands for results, empathy, personalization, laser focus, and you. The way I connected with Jason is that he used his own methodology on me. Jason researched me and this podcast, and then he sent me a personalized video message of himself speaking to me, in which he mentioned the show and he talked about a specific episode of this show. You can find a link to that video that Jason sent me in the show notes. That was the first time that anyone has ever reached out to me with a personalized video. And I thought it was a pretty powerful approach, partly because it is so unscalable. And I wanted to learn more about it. I mean, you can send out 1,000 uncustomized LinkedIn connection requests, and that can be automated or outsourced. But researching a target and recording a custom video message has a high signaling cost. And so I wanted to speak with Jason to learn how he uses the approach and the impact it's had. After having Jason explain to me how he creates these videos using a tool called Vidyard, I think it's an approach that could work well for many independent professionals. You can learn more about Jason on his firm's website, blissfulprospecting.com. Hello, Jason. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be on, Will. I'm looking forward to it.
So, Jason, I gotta say I was impressed by the way you reached out to me, and I hadn't seen this before, and so that's what convinced me to ask you to come on the show. You sent me a personalized video. Why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit about how you developed that video and what tools you used to create it? I thought it was pretty neat idea.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think one of the big things is, and we sort of started talking about this before we hit record, was a lot of people are starting to do cold outreach, and many of them are not doing it very well. And the things that really stick out like a sore thumb are really around lack of personalization, right? When you get a message on LinkedIn or an email and it doesn't look like it was written like as a one-to-one message, and the language is really generic, and there's nothing in there that's personalized outside of your name and company. What I want to do when I'm reaching out to someone is do the exact opposite of that. One, it's going to stick out more to that person, but two, the amount of research that it requires to do that is going to tell me if this is a good opportunity, whether that be for a podcast or for a client or anything like that. So video is really big right now because there's a lot of, sort of the space that we work in, is referred to as sales development. And one of the things that a lot of salespeople and entrepreneurs that do prospecting are having challenges with is getting in contact with people, because there's so many people sending out videos and email messages and LinkedIn messages doing calls that it's kind of hard to break through the clutter. And video is one of the ways that you can do that. So I don't know about you, Will. I've never really received a personalized video before. I think I've received one actually in the last couple of years. So it's very rare that people send them. And that's sort of where it starts, is like, hey, how can you differentiate yourself and look different? And I figured email is a good way to do that. I use a tool called Vidyard, and we can go over the specifics of like what to say and all that stuff. But yeah, it's getting the tool, figuring out what you want to say, keeping the pitch under 60 seconds if possible, and really just being a human is what it comes down to.
And let me just paint a little picture for folks. And if it's okay with you, Jason, we can include a link in the show notes to that video that you sent to me.
Sure. Yeah.
So I got an email from you, just said, and the first line was something like, hey, instead of an email, I recorded a personalized video for you. And the first frame of the video had you holding up a handwritten sign saying, hi, Will. So it was obvious just looking at it that it was a personalized video to me. So I'm like, that's kind of interesting. I haven't received that before. So I was like, okay, well, I will check this out. Because clearly, kind of just by signaling cost, right, you had invested more in the reach out than just someone who's sending out something going to 1,000 people, right? So I'm like, okay, personally, I'm curious. So I clicked on the video and you said, hey, I like Unleashed. And you mentioned a specific recent episode. Now, I doubt that you've listened to all 180 episodes so far. But my mother hasn't. I wouldn't expect you to. But you listened to one. You mentioned it. You referenced it. You say, hey, I like your podcast. I think what I do might be relevant to your listeners. You mentioned a specific recent episode, and you made a comment on that and said, and here's why I might be a good guest for the show. And so it was like about 60 to 90 seconds, so short. So nobody had ever done that before. I thought that was a pretty neat idea, and I thought it could be not just good for getting on podcasts, but a nice idea for not any, but a lot of interest, a lot of sales type roles where you have a limited number of high value clients that are willing to invest the time to record a video to reach out to them. Because maybe a year from now, everybody's going to be doing it. It's like, oh my God, that's one more thing we got to do. But right now, it's a way to distinguish yourself. Well, I'd like to walk through for both pieces, the technical piece of just literally how you create that using the Vidyard tool. We'll include that link. And then we can talk about some of the research that went into it or that goes into this kind of thing and some of the things to say, some things not to say. But maybe start with just the kind of the technical aspect of how do you create these things?
Yeah. So if you're sending email, you're probably using one of two solutions. You're probably either using Outlook or you're using Gmail. So the first thing would just be to go to Vidyard. The tool is called Vidyard Go Video. So you can download either the Gmail extension or do a search in your Outlook for an add-in. So it syncs directly up with your Google Chrome. So it's just a Chrome extension that lives in there. And essentially what you can do is you can click on it and it's going to allow you to look at someone's website or look at something else while you're recording the video. So I'll typically have the prospect's website and I already have a good idea of what I want to say prior to that. Using the tools is pretty simple. It's really just a couple clicks in the Chrome extension. There's a few best practices that I recommend prior to hitting record. So one, and you mentioned this, Will, is you have a whiteboard or a piece of paper that you can write the prospect's first name on. And that's going to embed that thumbnail into the email. And it's going to show them that it's personalized.
Yeah, that was key.
That
was key. I mean, because if it otherwise, you would not see visually and encourage the person to click. It just looks like you're sending out the same video to everyone. But I mean, if it's the person's name, okay, that's kind of neat. It's just for me. So keep going.
Yep. And the mentality here is to not shortcut the process. So, a lot of you listening to this, it sounds like you're selling things that are fairly high end and you want to work with high end clients. What is not impressive to a high end client is when you try to deceive them, right? So if you make it look like you're doing more than you're actually doing, that's not a good thing. So a few other things in that thumbnail, when it pops up, you're going to have that person's name on there. The other thing that's really important is to make eye contact with the camera. So then it's going to look like you're actually talking to the person. And this is a good best practice if you're doing a video call, like on Skype or Zoom as well. If you look at the camera when you're talking, it's going to make the person feel like you're looking at them instead of at a computer screen. Subtle little thing there. And lastly, this is more obvious, I think, to some people than others, but you want to smile. So in that thumbnail, definitely make sure to smile. I usually sort of wave at the camera, but be positive, be upbeat. This is just a good best practice when you're prospecting in general.
It doesn't hurt to smile in person as well when you're actually meeting someone.
Yeah,
it's a widely applicable recommendation, Jason. All right.
Yeah, and I know it sounds super obvious, but people get so serious when they do this stuff. So definitely want to smile. In terms of lighting, you want to make sure the lighting's good, but you don't need I don't have any professional lighting. I'm just in a home office. So the backdrop doesn't need to be super professional either. It just needs to be a clean looking backdrop. You don't have dirty clothes laying everywhere or, really busy in the background and that sort of thing. And that's pretty much it in terms of the technical parts of doing it.
Did you record this with like a laptop or with your phone, or how did you record it?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I just recorded it with a laptop. So just the laptop microphone.
Okay, so just the laptop microphone and the laptop built-in little camera. So not fancy in terms of equipment.
Yeah. The other thing, because I use a webcam, like a Logitech webcam actually,
Okay.
that's HD. So it depends on what kind of laptop you have. I noticed that the lighting on the laptops, like the MacBooks, is not like super awesome. So the Logitech webcam, I think you get for 30 or $40
Yeah,
is what I
yeah.
paid for mine. So it's pretty inexpensive. You don't need a professional camera setup or anything like that.
Okay. So you get yourself a webcam, and the way this works is like what you're in Chrome, and do you kind of hit record, like you're in Gmail and you hit record with the Vidyard button, or do you like, so technically how does it get recorded?
So the Chrome extension, you can activate Vidyard from any browser. So you don't even need to be in Gmail. I typically will have, like when I sent the video to you, I just had your website open. And then I had the iTunes page open where I was listening to one of the podcasts. I was like, oh, okay, cool. That thing sticks out. That looks interesting. And I just had your website open. What you can then do through the extension in Gmail is embed it. So like you can open up a new email, for example, and there'll be a little icon that pops up at the bottom, a little video icon. You can just embed the video right into the email.
Yeah, and then it's not, so listeners, so it's not just you seeing a link, oh, here's the link to video, but you're actually seeing like the screenshot of the video, and you can see, so you can click on it, and then it will open up a new browser window, but you're seeing the thumbnail of the video there.
Yep.
So if you have that Chrome extension with Gmail, then within Gmail you can kind of insert the video.
Yep, and it works the same with Outlook too, if you're using Outlook.
And is there anything special about that tool, or would it be just as good to like record it, upload it to, let's say, Vimeo, and make it a private video in Vimeo, and then then embed that video in your Gmail? Is there any advantage to using the tool that you do?
Yeah, so one thing, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, the reason why people are doing this through Vidyard is it originally started as a tool for marketers. So people would do like videos embedded into newsletter style emails, and they weren't personalized videos, but they wanted to get the stats on how long people were watching it and all this other good stuff. And then salespeople started using it to do one-to-one video. And that's where they started creating these specific workflows. So the time that it's going to save you is, instead of recording a video in a third-party software, I don't know, maybe use Camtasia or QuickTime or whatever you use, what you're avoiding is having to record it, save it on your computer, upload it into Vimeo, take a manual screenshot, embed that into the email, then hyperlink it. It's going to remove all those steps for you. So you can just hit record, and it's going to host the video on the site for you, on the Vidyard site. And it's going to give you something that you can copy and paste into the email that has the thumbnail already. So instead of taking, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes to do one of these, you can rip them out in like 60 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds.
Okay, really? So you can just record it, and all the workflows designed for this purpose. So you record it with the webcam. You don't even upload it to your computer. Record it with the webcam. It's automatically already uploading it to the cloud somewhere. You got your thumbnail. You paste it. Yeah. So so the, other than the actual recording, like recording time, it's an extra 60 seconds worth of clicking, and you're done with it.
Yep.
All right. So that's cool. And then does it actually give you stats on if it was viewed and so forth?
Yeah, it'll tell you the free version will tell you if it's viewed or not and what percentage of the video is watched. Okay. And then you can pay for other, sort of stats. I just use the free version.
All right. Cool. I think this is probably going to be an effect. I expect all of us are going to start receiving more of these personalized videos. It seems to be such a powerful technique, partly because of the signaling cost to it. It's a way to show that the person sending to you actually invested and is serious about it. And for a lot of us listeners, either using it in our own practice or kind of advising our clients, to think about doing something like this for their inside sales type groups. Let's talk now a little bit. So that's how you got my attention. I thought it was powerful. Let's talk more broadly about the whole kind of workflow that you do with your clients on kind of target, figuring out, helping your clients how to target potential customers, how to develop the messaging for it, and maybe a couple other steps. Help us understand your whole process.
So we really break this up into two parts. There's a targeting portion and then there's a messaging portion. And the mistake I see a lot of people make is focusing so much on the messaging and not thinking about who they're reaching out to. And that's where you get people wanting email templates, right? So if you're using an email template that you found online somewhere, you're already making a big mistake. Most of those get regurgitated. They're not personalized. They're not specific for what you're doing. So really what we came up with is something that we call the reply method. And for the targeting portion, we have another acronym for that called OPEN. So it starts, the very first thing that you want to start with, and the O in OPEN stands for organization. So you really want to think about like what your ideal client looks like. And it needs to be more than, hey, hopefully you're not saying we're industry agnostic, that you'll work with anyone in any industry. Even though you can do that, you don't want to reach out to someone like that. It'd be like going to, a doctor because you had a very serious disease that's a general practitioner, right? You wouldn't want to go to the general practitioner. You want to go to the specialist. So, and everyone on here seems to be doing those specialized types of solutions. So you definitely want to appear as a specialist when you're doing this type of outbound outreach. So starting with the ideal client profile, getting really detailed on, hey, what are the size of these companies? What industry or niches are they serving? And is there anything that I would be able to tell about this company around maybe the tools that they're using that would be a good indicator? So for example, if you're a consultant that does like marketing automation, if they're already using tools like HubSpot, like there's ways for you to figure out if they're using tools like Marketo, Pardot, HubSpot, et cetera, if they're using any sort of marketing automation. So you're going to look for those types of indicators on the organization level. So once you have a really good idea of like the company that you want to go after, that would be a good fit. And you can also base this, and where I would start is just your portfolio. So what kind of companies are you working with right now, and try to find patterns. A free tool that you can use is called Apollo, and it's apollo.io. So you can plug in all of the companies that you're working with right now, and you can find these patterns in like employee counts and their industry and technology that they're using on their website and all that good stuff. So after you've figured out the organization, the next part is the P in OPEN stands for persona. And this is where a lot of people skip. This part is like really thinking about, well, not only what the organization is that I'm reaching out to, but who are the specific people that I'm going to reach out to. And the reason why this is important is that even when we sell business to business, we're engaging with people, not companies. So we split these up into two areas. So a guy named Skip Miller wrote a book called Selling Above and Below the Line. And essentially what we're going to do is find an above the line persona and a below the line persona. So if you visualize a horizontal line, that's where the decision is made. A lot of times people call it the power line. The above the line personas are your C-levels and VPs. These are people that are more strategic in thinking. So a lot of times they're going to be caring most about revenue, profit, like reducing risk, and they're going to think in terms of quarters. And then the below the line is more maybe your directors and managers. These people are like the tacticians. The reason why we reach out to both is that oftentimes both of them can have equal sort of influence on the decision. And in business to business, people typically come together in committees to make decisions. So once we figure out like, okay, and do you want to use an example, Will, to make it more applicable? Is there something that you want to use, an example you can think of, or like someone listening to this might be selling, so that we can make it a little more actionable?
Sure. So I think most listeners of the show, independent consultants. So the buyer often for independent consultants is not the CEO of a Fortune 500 firm. Usually, it's often maybe someone at the VP level, SVP level. They have a budget for consulting. That person might not have a budget to hire a whole McKinsey team, but they'd have the budget to hire a kind of top tier independent consultant for a couple months. So typical buyer decision line, I guess, the power line would be the sort of that VP, SVP, possibly EVP level. Could be a C level at a smaller company, CEO or CFO of a $100 million, $200 million firm. Most people are probably focusing on that VP, SVP layer.
Got it. And what type of consulting?
So management consulting, most listeners of the
That's
show.
what I figured.
We, if you're, and listeners, I would love to hear from you. So if you, if I didn't describe you well, let me know. You can email me at unleashed@umbrex.com and tell me if I didn't capture you correctly.
So, okay, great. So we got management consulting, typically going to work with VPs, SVPs, that sort of thing. So there's your persona. Then what you want to do is take another step further. And what I like to think about is like, hey, what are these people's goals in relation to how I can help them? Are there any fears that they have associated with that? And then what are the obstacles that they might encounter on a regular basis or semi-regular basis that would keep them from accomplishing those goals? So once you have all of that information, what it does is it gives you some really good like word for word things that you can use when writing email copy and messaging copy or when sending videos. So once we've established organization, persona, so that's the O, that's the P in open. The E is how you choose to engage them. And the number one thing that you need to know here is that email works well, phone works well, video, social, all of those work well. What doesn't work well is if you only use one of them. So if you only send people emails, the likelihood that you're going to get a hold of them is less than half as likely as if you're combining two channels together. So that could be email, phone, email, video, it could be phone and video, phone and social, et cetera. Your chances of getting a hold of someone increase by about 2.5 times if you're doing at least two channels.
And that's interesting. I have not heard that before. It makes intuitive sense. How did you come up with that? Is that what's the research behind that?
Yeah, so InsideSales.com, they're a sales engagement platform. So sales engagement platform is essentially something you can plug these activities into and say, hey, I'm going to reach out to these people and I want to contact them 12 times over the course of a month. And I want to do this many emails, this many phone calls, et cetera. And they have hundreds of thousands of emails that get sent through their system and activities that get completed. And they studied, I believe it was around 45,000 outbound cadences. So cadence is like a sequence of these touches. And what they found is that the people that only did email had about a 9.5% success rate versus people that used like email and phone. And it was about 22.5% success rate. So that's like getting a response. The big thing that they found too is that there's a certain number of emails and phone calls that you would make or leaving voicemails that are optimal as well. So the sweet spot seems to be 4 to 6 emails, 2 to 3 voicemails, and then 1 or 2 touches on social over the period of about 30 to 40 days. That's going to.
So I'd like you to say that again because that is worth repeating. I want to make sure that I captured that. Could you say it again?
Yeah, it's around 4 to 6 touches via email, around 2 or 3 touches through the phone. And that could be leaving voicemails also, because most of the time you're not going to get a hold of the person.
Sure.
And then that would be 1 to 2 touches over social. And that's over the course of about 30 to 40-ish days.
What counts as a touch on social?
A touch on social could just be sending a connection request. And then once you're connected with someone, it could be liking or commenting on something that they wrote.
Okay, so not necessarily sending them a message, but sort of commenting.
Yeah, you don't have to send them a message. If you send a connection request and you include something, like I always like to personalize those.
Of course.
Maybe like, hey, Will, love what you're doing with your podcast, Unleashed. I like this episode, would love to follow you. Something like that. And if the person responds, you could start a conversation with them. But the point of doing multi-channel is that you don't know what the person you're reaching out to, you don't know what their preferred method of communication is. And typically, what a lot of the stats are showing is this kind of a generational thing. For the most part, younger people don't like picking up the phone for some reason and prefer to do email and social. And then we see the older generations preferring more phone and social. And again, everyone's got their personal preference though. So you want to do a little bit of everything so that if the person, wants to do phone and a lot of it has to do with the type of role that they're working in too. Very technical people are in front of the computer a lot, right? Versus reaching out to someone that's maybe more in sales that's likely going to be on the phone a lot or during a lot of meetings that might be more likely to pick up their phone. So point is, unless you tested it, you don't know. Like you want to do a little bit of everything.
Okay, that is really, really interesting point about the multi-channel. Let's keep going. Okay, so we OPE, engage, all right? I think we're on engage.
And then N is for need. So this is really like figuring out like what is the big need that you're fulfilling and what is like a trigger event that might cause them to like want to work with you. So for example, like we sell and do prospecting and sales training. So a big trigger event that people might need what we have to offer is if they're hiring salespeople right now. So if we see them having ads for sales development reps or business development reps, that's a trigger event. That's something that we could talk about in an email that is also likely an indicator that they are investing in their sales and that things are going well enough that they're growing. So what's the need? What's the big need? What's the trigger event? What are things that could happen that would be an indicator that they're, likely in the market for what you have to do?
Okay. What other sort of, so that makes sense for your firm, hiring salespeople equals, well, they got to train those salespeople. What, for the clients that you've served, what are some other triggers that you have seen?
Yeah. So another thing too is if you're working with publicly traded companies, you can look at their quarterly reports. So like, for example, like one of our clients sells like tax, they do like tax credits and like things like that. So like helps companies take advantage of like R&D credits. So one of the things they could look at in like quarterly reports are, hey, is this company investing in R&D? If they are, and they're talking about it, that would be a good indicator that obviously they might be in the market if they're not doing that sort of stuff and taking care of it in-house. Another type of client that we work with is professional services. So like if a accounting firm, for example, is looking for companies, another thing that they could do is, with tools like LinkedIn or Apollo, is they can see if a company, their headcount is growing. They can look at specific departments too that are growing. So departments that are maybe more cost centric, like your engineering departments and your technology departments, is the headcount growing in those departments? That's another trigger that you can look for as well.
And how would you do that in LinkedIn? LinkedIn makes it easy to look at the total number of employees. If you wanted to look at just the people in the finance department, how would you do that over time?
Yeah, so you can actually do these exact searches through their tool, Sales Navigator. So if you sign up, I think it's $80 a month.
Yeah.
You could get a lot of really cool account intelligence.
Okay.
So you can look and you can say, hey, I want to target companies, Fortune 1000, that have these types of departments that are growing right now.
Okay, cool. So that's in. All right, so open. So that's really all about the targeting piece.
Yep. One other thing too, in terms of like management consulting, is you could look for people that just started working at a company too. So if they just had a C-level or VP type of person, and these are like triggers that you can set up on LinkedIn just by following companies, but you can look for people that are newly hired too. That might be something to look at.
And how would you do that in LinkedIn?
Yeah, so same sort of thing with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So you can set up notifications and trigger when new people are hired or when people change positions too.
Oh, really? Okay. And in Sales Navigator,
really cool.
Can you look at? Don't tell me every new person that's hired, but I want to see any new VP level or above hires.
Yeah, so one of the things that you can sort by when you're doing lead searches is how long the person's been working at that company. So you could look for people that have been working at that, within 6 months of working at that company that are VPs of, whatever it might be.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So like one of the things you could do in your outreach that would be kind of interesting is, you can mention something about specifically how you help VPs of whatever department, sort of navigate through the challenges of starting at a new company. And you could share a piece of content with them that would be helpful and ask them if they're interested in talking about it. So there's all kinds of things that you can do there that are pretty cool with LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome.
All right,
let's talk about the reply method, right? For the messaging.
So we talked about targeting. So basically everything up to this point has been, hey, am I reaching out to the right company? Am I reaching out to the right person at that company? Am I engaging them in the right way? And then am I looking for some sort of trigger, like a reason to reach out to them? So the R in reply stands for results. So one of the things that's really important is that you're sharing and talking about a business goal that the prospect will care about. So Will, do you have like something that we could use that would be like specific in this scenario as well? Like a VP of something, and like, can you tell me a little bit more about what goal or KPI that they might be using to sort of measure their success in their position? We can use that as the example.
Sure. So let's see, off the top of my head, maybe we're reaching out to, maybe it's a consultant who does due diligence kind of work or market landscape, helps, companies understand a given industry. And maybe they work with private equity firms, but in this case, they're looking to work with the head of M&A in the corporate development at a company. What that person cares about in terms of results would be, have they actually managed to close deals and complete acquisitions in a given sector.
Okay. So where you want to really focus on the results then is like when a prospect gets an email, they need to go from, well, hey, what is this to, hey, these results look interesting. So where that primarily comes up is around the value prop and how you talk about what you do. So if you're reaching out to a head of mergers and acquisitions and it sounds like closed deals, and then these acquisitions that you were mentioning are the most important things to them. So you're going to talk about that. So you could say something along the lines of, hey, we help heads of mergers and acquisitions increase the number of closed deals by X percentage or X amount over the course of helping them in 12 months. However you want to say that specifically to what's applicable to what you're doing. So you would probably know the industry verbiage a little bit better than I would. So you want to have that specific, like closed deals. If that's important to them, you need to share results for a client that you got results with, whether it be through a case study or just a statement there where you're talking about the specific thing that you help them with. And in this case, increasing the number of closed deals or the percentage of closed deals, however they measure that. So, and this is where it comes in on the persona side, like really understanding, hey, who this person is, how they measure success, and sort of how you can insert your consulting services. So that value prop really needs to talk about, hey, I can help them with this specific business goal that they care about, and here's a tangible result that I can share with them. And typically the best way to do that is through that value prop statement. And then if you have a case study, you can share that or some sort of testimonials that you can link to on your website. The other thing that you're going to want to do on that results portion is talk about, some of the other companies that you might have worked with as well that are similar to the company you're reaching out to for social proof.
Okay.
So that's the results portion. So that's the R. So reply, the E is for empathy. So the thing that the prospect really needs to go through in this part when they're looking at your email is they need to go from, hey, it doesn't look like this person really understands me or our business to, this person's like really speaking my language. And the way that you do that, so those goals, challenges, and fears that we talked about when we're doing the persona, we really need to use that type of language in an email or in a video that we're sending as well. So I just kind of direct this to you, Will. Like, what are some of the so we know like what heads of M&A want to accomplish. Like, what is like a typical challenge they might have in accomplishing that?
A typical challenge might be they're probably incredibly busy with multiple potential discussions going on. So it's probably a challenge to kind of conduct the due diligence and have sort of time to do that. There, you can go to kind of the big consulting firms and get that, but that can be very, very expensive. So, finding an affordable but very reliable and high quality, consulting team who has access to be able to do expert interviews, maybe has even data or already understands the market to some degree, being able to find that team is probably something that they need.
Yeah, that's great stuff right there. So with the empathy piece, the way that might sound in an email is, hey, I know you're probably super busy with some discussions that you guys are currently having, and some of the things that that you need to do, you might not have the bandwidth for, like the due diligence. It sounds like prioritizing also is a big challenge. So you're specifically talking about the challenges that that they're having on a daily basis that are keeping them from either accomplishing their goals, or this could be keeping them from doing as good as they could be doing. So it's very important. Like the best way to do this, if you don't know exactly what the challenges are, you can just ask your current clients, like, hey, what are your biggest challenges related to like how we work with you and how we help you guys right now? And if you can use their language specifically and plug that into an email, they're just going to feel like you understand where they're coming from. It's empathy, right? This person understands me, they understand my job, they understand what I'm going through, and they're connecting how they can help me to my challenges. So one of the other big things here too that I recommend is when you write an email, this is a really basic tip, but read the email out loud as well. And one of the things that's going to do is like really make sure that it sounds human and that it's conversational. So that's the empathy piece. The P in replies for personalization. Really the big thing here is you either need to include a video that's personalized or personalize the first two sentences of the email. And it could be anything related to that trigger event that you found and the reason why you're reaching out to them. Or it could be related to something that you saw them, like, if these are VPs at, Fortune 1000s, for example, they might be putting up content. They might be contributing to a blog or have some sort of personal brand or have stuff that they post or share on LinkedIn. So that is something that you could talk about as well. But it needs to be personalized and clearly shown to them that you put some sort of work into the outreach and that you did some research up front. The L is for laser focus. And essentially what you need to do there's just a couple general rules. Like one of the big things I see people doing is their emails are just way too long. So a good rule of thumb is keep your email between 3 and 5 sentences and less than 120 words. So it needs to be easily read on mobile. So if you have to scroll on your phone, if you send it to yourself, if you have to scroll to read the entire email, it's a little bit too long. So essentially what you can do here is use a couple tools I recommend. Grammarly is a free one, and then Hemingway app is another one. These are 2 free tools that are going to help you sort of be more concise in your writing so that you can get it down to 3 to 5 sentences so that it's really easy to read and skim.
Okay, so show results, be empathetic, personalize it, but keep it to 120 words or less.
Yep.
Okay.
And then lastly, the Y stands for you. So what you want to do here, and again, another rule here that we found works really effectively is oftentimes people say I and we way too many times in the email. And if you can use you and your more times than you use I and we, you're going to be in pretty good shape. So instead of saying stuff like, I'm reaching out because of this, I was hoping we could hop on a call, we help with this, et cetera, you want to use words like you and your. So like with personalization, for example, you instead of saying, I was reaching out because of this, you could say, was reaching out, and just kind of cut that I out of it. And it's not like necessarily grammatically correct to do a lot of that, but cutting that out and making it more conversational in tone is going to be it's going to feel like the email is about them versus making it about you. So use you and your as much as possible and try to keep the I's and we's. I rarely use the word I in emails. I really try to keep it to our and we, and then use you and your as much as possible.
Okay. All right. So that is reply. And so that is a kind of, that was a whirlwind tour of how to target and then message folks. And one thing you didn't mention is what sort of call to action do you find works best? Is it, do you want to set up a call, or, are you the right person to talk to, or what's sort of the kind of calls to action? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you definitely want to test this for sure. But the ones that we found work best, just in our testing, is to be as specific as possible. So if you're sending 4 to 6 emails, like the first email, I keep it pretty casual. Like I might say something like, hey, interested in chatting, or hey, is this a challenge that you're having at this time? Or is this a priority of yours right now? And I keep it pretty open-ended on the first email. And then as I start to send more emails, I get very specific. So I'll say things like, what's the best way to get 15 minutes of your time? Are you free for 15 minutes this Thursday or Friday after 1 p.m. to chat? Or what time after 3 p.m. this Wednesday or Thursday works to chat for 15 minutes? I'm like very, very specific and make it very easy for them to respond to.
Interesting. That's interesting that you're finding that works. I kind of find that a little bit annoying sometimes when I get, I get a ton of these, right? Inbounds, and people say like, are you free Thursday at 1 p.m.? Like, no. It's just, but, I guess I'm not a good test case. So, but you find it actually, rather than just saying, are you free to talk sometime in the next 2 weeks? You find it better to say, hey, can you talk Friday afternoon after 1 o'clock? And,
Yeah. And the reason for that too is if the person's interested in what you have to, what you have to help them with,
Yeah.
if that time doesn't work for them, they're just going to say, actually that time doesn't work.
Uh-huh.
And then you can respond back and be like, hey, well, what's the best way to get 15 minutes of your time? And you could provide a calendar link if you want as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And are you sending the sequence with a tool? Tell us about the tool that you use to initiate and then send the sequence.
Yeah, you definitely want to use a tool because it's going to help you sort of automate the mundane parts of this. So what you can't automate is personalization. You're going to want to personalize this stuff every time. But typically what we have is a sequence that works pretty well, and then we personalize that sequence. So it's a templated email that has personalization in it, and then we have that good base of to work with. And we're using a tool called MixMax. So like MixMax will allow you to set up that cadence. So you can say, hey, I want to send 2 emails. The third outreach I want to call, and then I want to hit them up on social, and then I want to email them again. And I want it to automatically send an email to this person if they don't follow up, or I want it to create a task for me to call this person if they don't respond to the email. It'll take all of that like mundane work that you would have to manually do if you were just doing this all one-to-one by yourself.
Interesting. So with MixMax, you can have it, be that multi-channel of send out the emails, but then it creates a task for you to make a phone call and leave a voicemail, and then you go in MixMax and tick it off and say it's done, and then it reverts back to its email sequence.
Yep. And then you can also you can make calls through MixMax too. So they have like a dialer where you can make the call through the phone, which is pretty cool because then you have the entire workflow just on the computer.
Okay, that makes sense. What have you found is the best kind of time between outbound emails in terms of like number of days?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a lot of questions that people ask with cadences around, how long should the cadence be and how many days apart should each touch be? So the answer to that is it varies, but there's a couple general rules that you want to apply. You don't want to do touches closer than 48 hours apart. And the touches should be further apart the further into the sequence that you are. So for example, a lot of times when we're doing stuff, it's the first week is an email on Tuesday and Thursday. And then that Thursday email will also maybe follow it up with a phone call. And then the week after, we move to 2 days a week again, but we might just be doing emails. And then the week after that, it's like a once a week touch, then a once a week, and then it might go for 4 to 6 weeks. So the busier the person and the larger the organization, typically we spread the sequence out further. It might be like 45 days versus something that you're selling. Like some of the people that we help sell stuff that's really transactional, that's going to be like a 3-week cadence with like 10 to 12 touches in it. So just be mindful of who you're reaching out to. It sounds like for people listening to this, the best type of outreach, if you're reaching out to VPs at fairly large companies, it's going to be kind of spread it out a little bit and to not really pester the person too much, and make sure that you're adding value to them and sharing, helpful content, your case studies, whatever it might be, like really focused on their pain points and helping them and providing some sort of value in your outreach so that they look at you as someone that could help them and be a partner, so to speak, versus someone that's just trying to sell stuff to them.
Would you incorporate in there like touches on LinkedIn in that sequence?
Definitely. Yep. Yeah. So like that. So that first week, if we're using that as an example, email would go out on Tuesday, and then we'd send a connection request on LinkedIn that same day. And then Thursday would be an email and then a phone call. So that's 4 touches right there in a week.
What tools are you getting to get the email address and the phone number?
Phone numbers are really tough to get direct dials, but the tool that we're primarily using is called Apollo. And then you can also, has very similar functionality. You can use Sales Navigator with Lead IQ. And basically what that's going to do is Lead IQ is a Chrome extension that works when you have Sales Navigator open, and it'll allow you to like find people's emails and they have a lot of direct dials too. But in our experience, most people don't pick up the phone from numbers that they don't recognize. Mm-hmm. So most of the time you're leaving voicemails.
Okay. And where in that sequence typically would you suggest sending these video emails?
Yeah. So what I like about tools like MixMax, and that's they call those sales engagement platforms. So there's Outreach.io is another tool. SalesLoft is another tool that you could use. But with MixMax, you can prioritize prospects based on engagement. So unless I'm doing something that's like, So with podcasts, for example, there's a very finite number of podcasts that are a good fit for us to get on. So I send a video on the very first email. So if you're like, hey, there's only like maybe a pool of like maybe 50 companies that I could work with that really need what I have, you might include a video on the first email. But if you're looking at something where there's potentially hundreds or even thousands of companies out there that you could work with, I'll typically send them 2 or 3 emails first, and then I'll look and see who's opening the emails. And these tools will tell you who's opening it. And a lot of times what you're going to find is that if you send a good email, it might have gotten opened a half a dozen times. And what that means is it's probably getting forwarded around to other people. So one thing that I saw today, actually, right before this call, was someone sent an email back to me, I think on accident, saying, hey, can you look into this guy and see if we want to set up a time to chat with them? So like, I'm going to respond probably like with a video to that and be like, hey, I'm definitely worth chatting to. But bottom line there is that spend the extra effort on the people that are opening emails. If you're really good at this, you're going to get 50+% of people to open emails. Focus your extra effort around calling and recording personalized videos to the people that are actually engaging with what you're sending them.
Okay. So, and you're using MixMax to help track all that.
Yep. Yeah.
What are these called? Sales engagement platforms, you said?
Yep.
And I think I've seen that MixMax works with, the G Suite. Does it also work with Outlook, or are there other sales engagement platforms that work with Outlook or that people should look into when deciding among them?
Yeah, Outlook's a little tougher because their add-ins is what they call them. I think they're just a little more picky with tools and how they interact with them. So Outreach.io is probably the industry leader on the enterprise level. They just have a lot of widgets and stuff like that I don't personally find useful because we're a small company. I do all the prospecting. At our company, we don't have teams of people. So Outreach is one that you could use that would work with Outlook. The other one is Persist IQ. That would be the one that I would probably look into. It's not super expensive and, has the same kind of functionality where you can do calls and emails and that sort of stuff. I would probably start with those two on the Outlook side.
Fantastic. Jason, this has been a fantastic discussion. Where could people go to find more about your firm?
Definitely. So a couple areas. I put together a PDF for you guys on video prospecting at blissfulprospecting.com/Will. So what that'll have in it is like in 5 to 10 minutes, it'll show you like what to say in videos, like the tools, like all the step-by-step stuff that I shared today, but just in like a PDF that's like much easier to work with and follow. So I definitely would check that out if videos sounds like something that you want to do. Otherwise, just go to our website, blissfulprospecting.com. There's a couple really in-depth guides there. We have a newsletter that we send out on a biweekly basis where we recommend tools and give best practices. You'll be able to follow us on LinkedIn there. I try to post once or twice a week, just everything from cold email breakdowns to helpful prospecting tips. And you can really just kind of for free get a good idea of how we work with people and if it might be something that you want to talk about.
Fantastic. So we'll include those links in the show notes. Jason, this has been very informative for me. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Will.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is sponsored by Umbrex, the world's first global community of top-tier independent management consultants. The mission of Umbrex is to create opportunities for independent management consultants to meet, share lessons learned, and collaborate. I'd love to get your feedback and hear any questions that you'd like to see us answer on this show. You can email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. If you found anything on the show helpful, it would be a real gift if you would let a friend know about the show and take a minute to leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And if you subscribe, our show will get delivered to your device every Monday. Our audio engineer is Dave Nelson. Our theme song was composed by Gary Negbauer, and I'm your host, Will Bachman. Thanks for listening.